career and how to manage those. Usually we're talking about books about management and leadership and how to get the most out of other people and yourself. This one's very much focused on you and what you can do to improve your career and the overall productivity and happiness within your life. Now, before I dive too deeply into that, I did want to give a shout out. Next week, Friday, we're going to be discussing Spark, the new book that is out, another fantastic book. So be sure to tune in noon next week on Friday, Pacific Standard Time, and we'll be discussing that. So diving into Linchpin and Seth Godin's work, and he's produced a ton of books that are out there, and they're usually centralized on one idea, and then he rounds out the discussion in relation to this idea. The idea in this book is that what you do is an art. All right, what you really deliver as far as value, the unique value that you bring, can be art. And when you look at your work as art as opposed to just work, there's many different things that take place, and there's many different perspectives to take on it. And I very much like the way that he constructed this, like the way that the book is laid out, and it's very quick paced, almost like a bringing together of all of his blog posts. Very quick read to get through. So starting out, and I'll just dive in, and those that haven't tuned in to any of my book discussions before, what I do is basically go through all of the underlines that I might have, little call outs that I have in the book that made me think about something that's applicable to myself, to my clients, to anyone out there, or that can just be applied to frontline leaders that you can take away. So some of the highlights from the book. And if you have any questions, any discussion points, always drop down into the comment section. Happy to engage with you there and have a little bit of a discussion with it. The first thing right off the bat, first paragraph of the book in the introduction, a genius looks at something that others are stuck on and gets the world unstuck. And what he's tackling here is that all of us possess a genius. Every one of your employees possesses a genius for something, and that genius is most applicable in those cases where everybody else is stuck with something, and the genius sees the way out of that particular scenario. Almost all of us have had that happen at multiple times in our lives, school, work, family life, that sort of thing, where you see the way out of something that nobody else sees in the moment. That's an act of genius. And so just kind of pumping us up to kind of start out here, because again, getting back to that central theme of your work as an art form. And Jai Paul, so good to see you here, buddy. Thinking about your work as an art form is a little bit of a stretch for many of us, and that's something that he wants to address and kind of pump you up just a little bit right away with it. That all of us possess some form of genius for something in some moment, all right, and that makes that art form easier for it to come out. You don't become indispensable. Talking about some common misconceptions. You don't become indispensable merely because you are different. But the only way to be indispensable is to be different. And he's going to come back to this a couple of times. But the main point on this is, if you want to be a linchpin, if you want to be indispensable, if you want to reach your full potential, you are going to have to do things that are different from everybody else. Maza, good to see you here. Ididal. You're going to have to do things that are different, because the world and everybody in it is usually just kind of going with the flow. The world is a little bit more average on things. You want to make sure that you are above average, and to be above average, you have to be different. So you have to be ready, if you're going on this journey, to be different, to stand out. A lot of times what happens is that we try to do both of those things. So we try to stand out, but we try to still kind of fit in. And what I'm here to tell you is that's a recipe for failure. You're not going to be able to accomplish that. Abdulmin, good to see you here from Dubai, and Mahmoud, Neil, good to see you as well. So if you want to be more, if you want to be indispensable, if you want to develop your career, you're going to have to do things that the average person isn't willing to do, and that is going to make you different. And I did want to, before I get too deep into this, discuss the issue of being indispensable, because you'll hear some career counselors out there tell you that you don't want to be in a position where you're indispensable, because then you can't be promoted, you can't move on from that position. And I almost want to say that's putting the cart before the horse just a little bit. But I think what happens in those cases is that you have a position of power at that point. All right, you have a position of power when you are indispensable to create somebody who can be a backup for you. You've laid the groundwork at that point to what needs to happen, and so you have more freedom to get yourself out of that particular problem. I see being indispensable and not being promoted because you're indispensable is to being a minor problem as opposed to not making yourself indispensable. All right, so that's kind of my philosophy on it. So you'll hear that word come up a bunch of times. We'll probably address it at some point here in the comments section as well. But being indispensable puts you in a position of power, and that gives you greater freedom. Freedom either within the organization or outside of the organization as well. And in it, we'll talk about that personal competitive advantage. That is how it can be developed here, is leaning on yourself a little bit more. So talking about kind of going along with that whole being different philosophy is if you want a job where you get to do more than follow instructions, don't be surprised if you get asked to do things that were never taught to you in school. So one thing that I see high performers, and this happens with my coaching clients, it happens with my live Q&As, what happens a lot of times is you perform extraordinarily well. You are different. You are, I'll say it, above, the average as far as your team is concerned. And what happens with you in those cases? You get asked to do more. You get asked to do extra. This is not something that should be a surprise. As soon as you've broken out of the mold, then you've broken the mold, and that gives not just you freedom, but that gives your boss and the organization freedom as well as far as what it is that they give you. I encourage people to lean into those opportunities to do more. That's where the growth is going to happen. Maybe not instantly, maybe not 3 months from now, but the growth will happen. You want that opportunity because it then again separates you from the herd of other individuals, and that's what's going to help you progress in your career and gain extra skill sets as well. So don't be surprised by that as you start developing yourself, as you start looking for other opportunities to magnify your own importance within the organization. Don't be surprised when some of those things aren't your choice. Some of those things are thrust upon you by the organization. Let's see. When customers have the choice between faceless options, they pick the cheapest, fastest, and most direct option. And so he's talking here consumer behavior, but I wanted to flip this as far as your employer is concerned. When your employer has a choice between a bunch of faceless options, they will pick what is the easiest choice. All right. Now that can play in your favor, it cannot play in your favor. The thing is you want to make their choice not faceless. All right. This is where you are looking for opportunities to take on special projects. You're looking for those opportunities to do more work, because what that does is that gets your name out there amongst the team to their boss. All right. Because usually your boss isn't the final say in who gets promoted. They usually go to their boss for an approval ahead of time. And if your name is known ahead of time, then your boss's boss is more apt to be interested in you being moved into that role because they're familiar with your work. They know you. All right, that takes you out of the faceless pool of things. Now, just kind of a definition here, and he highlights it, and so I wanted to talk about it. The linchpin, and I kind of didn't know this. Eliana, so good to see you here. The linchpin is the pin that actually holds the wheel of a wagon. It's a wagon wheel, old wagon wheel term. So the linchpin is what holds the wheel onto the cart or whatever the wheel is attached to. That's the linchpin. All right, it's that central piece of, in this case, the organizational structure that everything else moves around. That is the center of the universe. Now, those are your most valuable employees. Those are hopefully what you become in your organization, where if you were to disappear one day, the operation would not function as well as it could before. And there's a whole other topic, again, with coming up with backups for yourself when you reach that sort of linchpin status on things. Where linchpins really come in is when you marry two things together. Janine, so good to see you here in the land down under. Nice and early over there on a Saturday morning. Glad you tuned in. where you gain linchpin status, and that's a question that I get, is how can I magnify my sense of importance, my importance within the organization, is where you marry a depth of knowledge and combine that with good discernment. So he says here, depth of knowledge combined with good judgment is worth a lot. All right. So what you're looking is not just the depth of knowledge. You probably have that already if you're asking these questions. Now you're looking to find ways of using that knowledge. Look for opportunities to make improvements. Cost cutting. I've heard it said it's like catnip for bosses. All right. Cost cuts are like catnip. All right, find ways to use your depth of knowledge in how things function in the product, in the customer, to cut costs. Or look for opportunities to magnify revenue. All of those things lead to better profits, which is what everybody's always concerned about. But take that depth of knowledge that you have and then look to start practicing using good judgment with those, finding opportunities with those. That's what really gets you to that linchpin status within your organizations. So that's the key. And in this case, talking about Marissa Meyer, before she actually headed up Yahoo, back when she was with Google, that's the key. She solves problems that people haven't predicted. She sees things people haven't seen and connects people who need to be connected. So using that good judgment, that depth of knowledge, that perspective that you have within your organization, and then you apply it. And you apply it in areas that your boss can't see because they don't have your perspective on things. And so in this case, you fix the problems that nobody saw coming ahead of time, or certainly nobody that was up the food chain in the organization. That's what you're looking to do. Bring information to the forefront and then start connecting people, getting people together a little bit more that need to be brought together to fix issues that are coming up. So getting into starting to talk more about becoming a linchpin and developing your art in your work. So one of the things that you notice is we've been trained since first grade to avoid mistakes. And don't get me wrong, in this book, Seth Godin goes on a little bit of a screed through the whole thing about the state of education, how poor our educational system is. And he's gone on to create his own little alt MBA, is what he calls it. We've been trained since first grade to avoid mistakes. So what happens in these cases is when you have that mindset that you want to avoid mistakes, you don't try anything new. The easiest way to avoid a mistake is to do nothing. All right, I'm going to say that again. The easiest way to avoid a mistake is doing nothing. And so if you want to do something, there's going to be a risk that's associated with it. All right, the problem is simple. Art is never defect-free. Things that are remarkable are never meet spec, because that would make them standardized, not worth talking about. So if you want to be remarkable, if you want to do remarkable work, you have to do work that hasn't been done before. And to do work that hasn't been done before, you have to be willing to make some mistakes. If it was I really like this point that kind of brings it all together. If it wasn't a mystery, it would be easy. If it were easy, it wouldn't be worth very much. All right, so if you want to be different, if you want to magnify your career, you need to look for opportunities to do those things that are new, to address problems that people are unaware of ahead of time, because it's in that mystery that you create that value. And it's not easy, as he says, it's not easy, but nothing worthwhile is. If it's easy, it's cheap. If it's easy, everybody else is doing it. And if it's easy, you're not going to get credit for that sort of work. That's not going to be the thing that stands out and moves your career down the pike. It turns out, so going kind of along with that a little bit, as we go lower down the totem pole through organizations, though, management assumes that less pay equals less humanity. And what they mean by that is they expect more of robotics. So as you move from the CEO on down, vice presidents, directors, managers, supervisors, frontline people, you expect to see less humanity brought to it, less discernment brought to the particular position. That's just a natural thought on things. But the thing is what's been proven out over and over again is it turns out that the more humanity you deliver, the better the results are. And you can see this in any of your frontline positions that you have currently, or any in the first jobs that you received back in high school or back in college, when you were working on the front lines. It was those people that brought greater humanity, that allowed their personalities to shine, that engaged with the customer a little bit more, those were the ones that achieved the good results. Those were the ones that everybody went to when they had a troubled customer. Those were the ones that sold more. They didn't just follow the script, and there was usually a script involved. That's robotic. It's those that add more humanity that actually get better results. And so you want to bring more of yourself, more of your individual self to your job, and that was going to be something that gets better results. Now, you naturally ask the question, okay, well, what is it exactly? What does humanity mean in this case? What should I be bringing to my job? And the answer is it varies. And one of the reasons, and he just states it very clearly here, is that the easier it is to quantify, the less it's worth. All right. If I could quantify what you need to bring to the job, if you need to smile 15 times within an interaction with a customer to get X amount of sales, then what's going to happen is that becomes less and less valuable. And those sales then decrease is what's going to end up happening with that. So it's a lot of these things where you can't put your finger on it, where you don't know exactly what it is, but you know what it is when you see it. Those are the things that you want to look for. Those are the things that you want to bring into your work and how you work. And those are the things that are going to create the benefits for you down the road as far as performance is concerned. Now, we briefly talked about being willing to make mistakes. All right, and here's what's going to happen. So you want more out of your career. So you're going to look for those opportunities to create, to exercise good judgment. You're going to look for those gray areas where you have the empowerment and the flexibility to tweak things just a little bit to see if they work. You're going to try something new. Maybe you're going to ask for forgiveness instead of permission with your boss. That's a big one. All right. Now, here's the thing. You're going to fail. All right. You're going to mess up. But all the great masters, and he dives back into art here with this, all the great masters failed regularly. Picasso painted more than 1,000 paintings, and you can probably name 3 of them or less. As we'll see, the greatest shortage in our society is an instinct to produce. So you are going to try to do something. All right, you're going to try something different, and maybe you fail. All right, but what is almost just as likely to happen as failure, if not even more likely, is that you stop before you finish. All right, it isn't just that you try something, it works, doesn't work, and you try it again. That's important as well. But there's a ton of, the great American novel. 90% of novels that are out there haven't been finished. People that want to write a novel. I've got ideas in my head of fiction pieces to write. All right, but they don't actually finish it. That's most of the game. That's 90% of the game, is finishing what you started and set out to do. Then you learn from it and you keep persevering after that. The only purpose of starting is to finish. All right. Shipping is the collision between your work, and the outside world. All right. So it's taking your work, what you're working on, and presenting it out there in the world. That's what matters. All right. You don't start something if you don't intend on finishing it. So when you continue to reap those failures, and you're going to reap them, what you need to realize is what the winners realize, and that is they don't learn that they shouldn't have tried in the first place. And they don't learn that they are always right and the world is wrong. And they don't learn that they are losers. You become a winner because you're good at losing. Earlier this morning, I was discussing with one of my private coaching clients, and she went for a directorship position, and she didn't get it. She's really well qualified for that particular position. She didn't get it. That's not something that I want to say is a surprise. All right, you're going to have to keep persevering. She asked for some feedback. She got some okay feedback from the people that made the decision, and she can kind of look to play those out. But she's going to keep working, keep learning. We were able to tweak her resume a little bit more. We were able to talk about a presentation. She's going to go into that with more confidence next time. And it goes and it builds from there. I can't guarantee that she was going to get this job, but what I can guarantee is that she is going to get a job if she keeps working at it. She's going to get the job that she wants to get at the director level if she keeps working at it. I don't really think it would take much more than a year at this point. And jobs are a little harder to come by as you move up that food chain. And that's it, Tom. The growth mindset is a great one to have on that. Next comment I have here is finding good ideas. And so and this is another one, probably one of the most important takeaways from this reading of this book that I got in this case, and I want you to really tune into this, is, you might say, okay, well, I get it, Cameron. I'm supposed to use my good judgment. I'm supposed to take my deep understanding of the position, of the customer, of everything else, and start using my judgment. But where on earth do I start using my judgment? The thing is you need those ideas. All right, finding good ideas is surprisingly easy once you deal with the problem of finding bad ideas. All the creativity books in the world aren't going to help you if you're unwilling to have lousy, lame, and even dangerously bad ideas. All right, you want to free yourself up from this. And he goes to some examples from when he works with teams on this. And he says, they say, well, I don't have any good ideas for improving such and such. And his answer is a question. Well, do you have any bad ideas on how to improve such and such? And their answer is almost always no. So what they have is no ideas, period, good or bad. What happens a lot is those bad ideas spout a little kernel of truth. And you put enough of those bad ideas out there, and you actually get something that blooms out of that. That's your classic brainstorming situation. But if you don't have any good ideas on improving your situation, if you don't have any good ideas on what your next steps are, start with a whole bunch of bad ideas and then work from there. All right. One way to become creative is to discipline yourself to generate bad ideas. The worse the idea, the better. Do it a lot, and magically you'll discover that some good ones slip through. All right. And I've seen that play out over and over and over again when we work through things with clients that, you'll start down that road and nothing really clicks and nothing really clicks, and you keep at it and you keep generating, well, what if this? What if that? What if that? And then all of a sudden something comes up. It may have been the 15th idea that came down the pike, but that's something. All right. And that's the sort of perseverance that it takes. But if you want more good ideas, create more bad ideas. I think it's Scott Adams that actually does this. I could be mistaken in that, where he comes up with 10 ideas for a comic strip every single day. Every single day he comes up with 10 ideas. And he might not even work on all of those. But then the next day he comes up with 10 more ideas. All right. And what happens is through that exercise, he's constantly coming up with ideas. And that's creating a fruitful mind with which he can come up with the ones that he actually goes and produces. I think it's him in that example. The other thing to tackle in this is the resistance that your mind is going to have to stepping out, to doing more, to putting yourself in the spotlight. There's lots of fear that gets surrounded in that. And one of the most important things with that is time. All right, we get ourselves constantly busy with a whole bunch of unimportant things. We've all seen it. We all know that tomorrow we need to, on Monday we need to do these 3 things. And then on Tuesday morning we're going to come in and go, oh wait, we still need to do those 3 things that we needed to do on Monday. All right. Time management isn't the issue. It's your management and your focus on that time. So that hour a day, and they're talking about just working on your art. This is extra. All right. Doing that little bit of extra to develop yourself into becoming a linchpin. Doing an extra hour a day. All right. May not be fun, but it's probably a lot more productive than the 10 hours that you spend now. I know I've seen that myself in my own work, where all of a sudden I will be spinning my wheels for 8 hours. And then it's 1 hour right before the deadline that all of the ideas come out and it works just fine. Yes, widen the options, evaluating, comparing. Yes, Tom. And Tom, I've actually picked up the new Heath book, The Power of Moments. I'll probably be reviewing that one here in a couple of weeks. Just FYI on that one. The difference between a successful artist and a failed one happens after the idea is hatched. The difference is the race to completion. I've heard this said many times. Ideas are cheap. Execution is what's valuable. All right? The idea is useless if you don't bring it to market, if you don't get it out in the world. And so come up with those ideas. That's hugely important. Don't get me wrong with that. But realize that you're going to have to come up with a means of actually getting that idea across the finish line. Now, one of the ways that you do that is you start very simply. A lot of us think about these big projects or developing an extra talent. We think about it as pushing a rock up a hill. All right. I've used that analogy before. And what happens is if you're not putting constant pressure on it, then it's going to fall back and you're going to lose that momentum. Flip that just a little bit. And I want you to think about rolling a hill from the top of the hill down. At that point, all you need is a little momentum. And maybe you hear me talk about this in live sessions and elsewhere. One little step. This was a single step leadership discussion just recently. What is one single step, the smallest step that you can take towards your goal, towards getting that project that you're working on completed? All right, towards your own physical fitness. It applies everywhere. Start at the top of the hill, not the bottom. One little step to get you started, and then it grows and grows ever faster. No amount of resistance can stop this from happening. Building that momentum. I see this over and over with my clients. We talk about the first 15 minutes of their day. Closing the door, not opening emails, and getting started on those things that are high priority items for them. Now, in 15 minutes, they won't get most of those things done. All right, maybe they will, but most of the time they won't. But what you find is you've created enough momentum at that point to where it's easy to pick it up throughout the day and actually get it finished. So at the end of the day, you're driving home and you have accomplished what you set out to do, not wondering where the day went in that particular case. Next comment I have from here is talking about gifts. All right, the gift of your art, as Seth Godin is laying out here, but also what you're doing to bring extra value and to make yourself a linchpin. One of the ways to consider that is a gift, that perception that you have where you're seeing problems that nobody else is seeing. All right, that's not part of your job description, or certainly not the job description of everybody else in your particular organization or at your level. All right, that is a gift to the organization. The fact that we can't repay him is precisely why his gift is so valuable, talking through a scenario. The fact that they can't repay you, the fact that they can't replace you is what makes you even more valuable. All right, and again, being indispensable has a downside, but it's easier to manage that downside once you are indispensable. It gives you lots of benefits as well. But looking at those things where you are giving something, not in any intention to get something. And in fact, if they can't give you back anything as worthwhile, that makes it even more valuable. Just an interesting concept to play with. The other thing is an acknowledgement that there is no map to this project. Each of you are unique individuals with unique talents. You have a genius within you, but you have to develop that yourself. You have to bring it up yourself, and there are a myriad, 7 billion different situations that everybody finds themselves in here. So there isn't necessarily a clean map. All right, but the first place to realize is you want to know where you're starting and what you have. And the analogy that he had here, and I really like this, is not worrying about what you don't have. All right, not looking too far into the future. The diamond cutter doesn't imagine the diamond that he wants. A diamond cutter gets a rock, basically. And the great diamond cutters know how to get as much as possible from that rock. All right, how to cut it just the right way to get the most diamonds with the most carats, the least amount of waste, that sort of thing from it. All right, the diamond cutter doesn't imagine the diamond that he wants. He doesn't imagine a bigger one with more clarity to it, that sort of thing. All he does instead is he sees the diamond that is possible. All right, not the diamond I want. All right, I want to be in such and such place in my career. All right, but what is possible right now? What do I see based on what I'm seeing right now? Get focused on where you are in the present. All right, there's two things that you need to reach your destination, any destination on a map. You need to know where you're going, and you need to know where you are. All right, so be focused on where you are and what the possibilities are for yourself with where you are. Get clear on those things. Don't get too focused on where you would prefer to be. You know, I'm up in San Francisco today. You know, we all might prefer to work at Google or at Facebook, or maybe not. All right, we would prefer that. All right, but that's not possible based on where we want to live, what our skill set is, whatever else. Get focused on where you are and what's possible where you are. That's where you want to focus. 2 reasons why seeing the future is so difficult. So looking into the future, why is it so difficult? Why do people have such a problem predicting where they're going? That sort of thing. 2 reasons. Attachment to an outcome combined with the resistance and fear of change. That's it. So the reason that your vision of the future gets clouded is you have an attachment to the outcome of your career. All right? Very attached to the outcome of your career. All right? So that creates bias and creates clouds in the future. The other thing is we all have a resistance to change. All right? Every one of us is hardwired, all right? It's hardwired into our brains to resist change. Change is the unknown, and the unknown could be dangerous. So all of that biology that goes into our brain says change is something that we don't want to really embrace because it brings along with it risk, and we have a natural sense of and desire for safety. And so that's what we tend to focus on more. So 2 reasons why you can't see the future: an attachment to the outcome and a fear of change. That's it. That's what clouds that vision for everybody that's out there. All right. Successful people are able to see the threads of the past and the threads of the future and untangle them into something that is manageable. All right. So it's talking about untangling the truth and seeing where you want to go with things. All right. So you see what things are right now. All right, you see to use the diamond cutter example, you see how things are right now. What is the result of where we have come from? All right, and then you see what is potential there, and you weave those things together. The growth of the home office. She was expecting that thought. Yeah. So, and I guess James, that one might come in a little bit late. If you can clarify what it is, I have no problem having those thoughts challenged. Successful people are able to see the threads of the past and the threads of the future and untangle them into something that is manageable. And that's why outsiders and insurgents so often invent the next big thing. They don't start with that tangled past. A lot of the issues as far as seeing the future is that you're not properly seeing the trajectory to start out with because you are caught up in some of those past things. That's why people can come in from the outside and like instantly see, and you're like, why didn't I think of that? And it's because of that baggage that you might have. Next comment here is, and it was one of these throwaway comments in the book, but something that jumped out and something to keep in mind. How often do you beat yourself up? All right, if you're like me, you beat yourself up on a regular basis. These are the mistakes I made. This is how it could have been better. These are how many times I said in my last book discussion. All of those things. We tend to beat ourselves up quite a bit. And he doesn't actually call this out here as much, but what you want to do is be generous with yourself. All right, the counteracting of that is spend some time. This is why those gratitude challenges are so popular, is people see the benefits of being grateful for the things that have occurred, all right? Not beating themselves up over what has occurred, balancing that out a little bit. And it's something that's important, and especially if you're going to take a new journey and start going on a new trajectory in your career, it's important that you give yourself some positive motivation, because you're going to get plenty of negative motivation as you stumble and fall, as you're trying to pick up and start running instead of walking, all right? You don't start with, and going along with this journey, you don't start with the confidence of the company. You earn it. All right, I'm going to say that again. You don't start with the confidence of the company. You earn it. If you want to be a linchpin, if you want to bring more of yourself, more of your humanity, if you want to do different things within the organization, you're going to have to earn that right. And that's often, the word earn sounds like work for a very good reason. It is work. All right, you're going to have to bring that little bit of extra, but it will come through persistence and through learning from failure. All right, take some stumbles, learn, stumble again, learn, stumble again. You will get to where you want to go if you have the perseverance to see yourself through to it. It's so easy, and this gets into my point I made right at the beginning. It's so easy to try to compromise, to do both of these things, to be a linchpin and be a regular employee, all right? To fit in and to stand out. But if you try to fit in and stand out, you are going to fail in this endeavor. You are going to need to be different because you're doing something different, and that's fine. There is a safety in being, being in with the crowd. All right. But if you want to move on in your career, you're going to have to step out of that crowd. And that's a good thing. You want different results, you're going to have to be different. All right. So, great little book, Linchpin, one of those that I read many years ago, revisited it just now. Lots of good takeaways as far as your career is concerned, and just reframing. A lot of discussion in this about art, all right, and bringing art. And part of that is just bringing yourself into your work. And if you can bring more of yourself into your work, if you can make it more human, if you can start developing and get past that fear of making mistakes, then you can kind of develop it, and you're going to develop your career a little bit more as well. If you have any questions on that, by all means, drop down in the comment section. Happy to interact with you there. Otherwise, that was Linchpin, and next week we are talking about Spark from Angie Morgan, new book, and I'm excited to get into this one as well. That'll be noon Pacific Standard Time next Friday. I will talk to you all later. Take care, everybody, and have a good weekend. Bye-bye.